All right, we're now recording. Okay, so let's deal with a topic I didn't get a chance to do with the in-person class. Let's do big number, what are we on? Sam, what are we? K?
Okay.
All right, so big number K is going to be the FCC Fairness Doctrine revoked. The FCC Fairness Doctrine revoked. Okay, so when television was invented, we, in the beginning, for the first decades of television, so we've had, at this point, we had television for the 50s, 60s, and 70s, right? For the first 30 years of television, we really only had like 4 networks, okay? We had like ABC, NBC, CBS, and then PBS, which is the public broadcasting, right? And those were the only networks that we really had. Some big cities had a couple other networks, but we didn't have anything else. By the time we get to the 1980s, we've invented cable television. And by inventing cable television, we've created a whole bunch of new channels that are showing up. And these new channels appeal to all sorts of different people and all sorts of different, smaller and smaller audiences, right? This way you can have an entire channel dedicated to like music, or an entire channel dedicated to the news, or dedicated to whatever, golf or something, or cooking or something like that, right? There's all sorts of channels that are dedicated to small things. And one of the issues was that people did not like something called the FCC Fairness Doctrine. So the FCC Fairness Doctrine was a law that said that any kind of news broadcast had to meet a standard of fairness defined by the government. And so what this meant was that all news broadcasts basically were the same, right? They were all reporting on only the facts of the news. They were only allowed to report on the facts of the news. They were not allowed to report on what we would call editorial, right? So they were not able to report on things like opinions, stuff like that. And people didn't like this. They thought that this was too restrictive. A lot of people did. And Reagan did not like this either, right? Ronald Reagan very, very strongly believed that the restrictions need to be lifted and that channels could say whatever they want. So he passes this, he revokes the Fairness Doctrine in 1987. And this means that from this point forward, nobody's regulating any news stories. The news can now say whatever it wants. Which means the news can do editorials, the news can have opinion, the news can choose to not report things, the news can choose to report different kinds of things, right? That the news can basically do whatever it wants, up to and including lies. The news now can lie if it wants to, right? This is where we've gotten to the point now where television news today is quite unreliable. It's quite unreliable. Television news today has a lot of what we've been calling for the last 4 years fake news, right? And this is where you're going to get these channels that are like super political channels, and these channels are now no longer reporting the same kind of facts. They're now reporting made up facts and facts that they care about, right? This is where we get to a point where half the country doesn't believe that the election was fair, right? And that's because a lot of the news agencies have been saying that the election wasn't fair, even though there's no evidence. The biggest figure to come out of this era is Rush Limbaugh, who just died like a month ago. Rush Limbaugh was a radio star, and he was the first really big radio talk show host star, and he was very, very conservative. He pushed a very, very conservative message, and became very, very popular. Conservative America didn't have can't find my I used to have like my little pointer thing. I don't have it anymore. Anyway, conservative America used to say that they didn't have a voice in the news, that the news had a liberal bias to it. And so conservative America was really like hungry for someone who was going to talk their perspective. And Rush Limbaugh stepped in and filled that void, and he became immensely popular. And because he became so popular, he kind of propelled the entire talk radio industry into popularity. That eventually turns into Fox News and eventually creates, this massive um, grouping of news that's an alternate way of looking at things. Okay. If you're wondering why politicians seem to hate each other so much today and why we're so polarized today, this is a very, very big reason why. Okay. Does this make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Have questions about it?
No.
Interesting. All right. We did war on drugs, right? We did
Yeah.
AIDS. All right. Let's look at immigration also. All right. So immigration policy.
Do we want this as a new letter?
Yeah. Let's make a new letter. J.
L.
L. Okay. Big number L. Big number L is immigration policy. All right. So at this point in time, the United States is in the fourth wave of immigration. The fourth wave of immigration, and this is the largest wave of immigration by numbers. Okay. Starting in the 1970s and going from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, we're at this giant wave of immigration. And the immigrants in the fourth wave are mostly coming from Latin America. This is where we're going to get the huge influx of Mexicans into the country, but not just Mexicans. We're also going to get a huge influx of Nicaraguans, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Cuba. And then later, after the 2000s, we're going to get a huge influx of Filipinos, Vietnamese, Koreans, Chinese, and Indians. Okay, right now, today, the largest immigrant countries are China and India. Those are the two largest countries that are coming to the United States today, right? But for a long time, it was Mexicans. For a long, long time. Mexico is still number 3. Okay. This caused a lot of anxiety, right? Whenever we get a big wave of immigration, right? The bigger the wave of immigration, the bigger what? What's going to come? What always follows a big wave of immigration? How are the native people always going to react? Are the native people of the country going to like open their arms and say, "Welcome to my country, immigrants"?
No.
They're gonna react scared.
Yeah, we're going to call it anti-immigrant anxiety, right? So the greater the wave of immigration, the greater the anxiety. It's anti-immigrant sentiment, right? People are really scared of change. A lot of people are scared of change, and they're especially scared of change when you're also kind of triggering their racism, right? This new wave of immigrants are not white, right? They're coming from Latin America and they're coming from Asia. And so it's the first time that we've had a major wave of immigration that is a majority not white. And this is going to cause a big change in the United States. And this is a big change that's not going away. Okay. So by the 1980s, we had gotten to the point where we had 4 million undocumented immigrants in the United States. 4 million, a number so big that no one in the country could ever conceive that we would have that many undocumented immigrants. These are immigrants that crossed the border without any kind of documentation. They came over illegally, right? If you're not polite, you would say they're illegal immigrants. Okay. So Reagan tries to deal with this. He makes a compromise here. They passed this immigration policy of 1986, and the compromise is that companies can no longer hire undocumented immigrants. It's now a crime. So if your company is caught hiring people who are not documented, your company gets fined. Okay? So they're trying to tighten this down. The exchange is that Reagan gave amnesty for 4 million undocumented immigrants and they all became citizens. So, Fernanda, what do you think about this compromise? Did we lose you? Are you frozen? All right, Sam, what do you think about this compromise?
I think it's interesting because you can see both sides of it, because you can, like, it makes sense that if you aren't documented in like the US and like in that kind of, like, you aren't documented, you're like kind of under the radar, it makes sense that companies can't hire you. And then like the compromise with giving the citizenship to everyone, I can see how it can frustrate a lot of other immigrants that came over here legally.
Okay.
They
Yeah.
come over here, they do the paperwork, and then the other people come over here and they just kind of get it.
Yeah.
I can see how it can frustrate the other side.
Sure. Sure. What do you think the result is going to be for undocumented immigration to the United States after this? Do you think this compromise is going to increase or decrease undocumented immigrants?
I mean, it'll obviously decrease it because I mean, you gave citizenship to 4 million to the 4 million people, and so obviously it's going to go down pretty instantaneously. But then
Yeah, but let's
I
say
feel like
10 years later.
It'll go down pretty instantly. But then I feel like other people from these other countries will come and see, oh, they got into the US and I can go and get my citizenship just that quickly as well.
Yeah.
So I think it'll rise back up pretty quickly.
Yeah. So you're absolutely correct. Your instinct is absolutely correct, Sam, is that it is going to rise quickly. I told you this was 4 million undocumented immigrants, which is a number so high that no one could ever conceive it today. Today, the number is 13 million. Right? So today we have another 13 million. This also doesn't really solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Very short term.
Well, we didn't solve the problem. There is nothing stopping the undocumented people from coming over. Right? So you could say it again.
There isn't border control.
Well, they do have some border control, but you're right. Mostly they're not. Mostly they're just looking at drugs, like drug trafficking and stuff. They're not really stopping people who just want to work. This is going to be a issue that's not going to go away. This issue is going to stay with us all the way up until Biden's presidency, right? I mean, this is one of the big issues Biden's dealing with today, right? So this issue is not going to go away, and this is a big issue. A lot of people view Reagan's actions here as a failure. They say he shouldn't have given the amnesty because future immigrants think that they're all just going to get amnesty as well.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of people think this is a failure. Other people say it's a failure because he should have given amnesty, but he also should have made it a policy to increase the number of immigrants over time. Right? Because economically, we want immigrants. Immigrants are good for the economy. They're good for businesses. They're good for the country's growth, right? Immigrants are very, very good for the country.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't actually increase the number of immigrants, right? And so the waiting list to become an American citizen used to be like 3 years long. Today, it's like 13 years long, right? 13 years is a long, long time to wait. If you're trying to get your kids into a good school and you're trying to, get a job and buy a house, 13 years is too long to wait if you're trying to save your kids from drug violence, cartel violence or something, right? We're going to just leave this issue alone for now because it's not going to get solved anytime soon. This issue is just going to continue to be a point of anxiety for the country for a long time. Okay. All right. So let's jump to here. The Cold War starts to end.
New letter.
Yep. Big number M, and this will be our last thing, right? The Cold War is starting to come to an end in the late 1980s. In the late 1980s, as the Cold War is starting to crash to an end, what's happening is In the Soviet Union, the economy of the Soviet Union is collapsing. Okay, the economy of the Soviet Union is basically built on lies and murder. On lies and murder, and the entire economy is based on lies, essentially. And so what the problem here is that if you have a communist economy, the government tells you what to do, right? So like if you run a factory and I tell you, you have to build, 1 million pencils, right? You run a pencil factory, right? And you didn't get wood delivered to you, right? So you were only able to build 500,000 pencils. Okay. Now, are you going to tell me that you were only able to build 500,000 pencils if you know that you're going to get killed for not meeting the number?
No.
No. What are you going to do?
Gonna lie? 'Cause I don't
Of course you're going to lie. Of course you're going to lie because you don't want to be murdered, right? And so the economy is based on murders and lies. And so you are supposed to create 1 million pencils. You instead only created 500,000 pencils, but you put on the paper that 1 million went out, right? And so I'm on the other side of the country now. I open up my box of pencils. The box tells me that there's 20 pencils inside, and I open it up and there's 3, right? And then I look at my receipt and the receipt says, you got 20 pencils. And really, I only got 3 pencils, right? Like the entire economy is based on that. So the Soviet Union gets this new leader. His name is Mikhail Gorbachev, right here. He's the leader of the Soviet Union, and he's in the 1980s. And he's a reformer. He wants to try to save the Soviet Union because he recognizes that the Soviet Union is falling apart. He's going to enact these 2 policies, perestroika and glasnost. Perestroika, glasnost. So perestroika means restructuring. It means restructuring. What he's trying to do is basically recreate the government to remove the corruption and lies. He's trying to recreate the government to remove the corruption and lies. His other policy is called glasnost. Glasnost translates to being openness. Openness. And what he's trying to do here is he's trying to open up all of the government so that he reveals the truth of what's going on and removes all the lies out of the system. Here's the problem. What do you think the Russian people are going to do as soon as all the lies are revealed?
They aren't gonna just forgive it. They aren't gonna be like, okay, it's fine.
Yeah, they're gonna be pretty pissed,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
But when it's revealed that 90% of the Soviet economy is made up and doesn't actually exist, what are they gonna do?
They're probably gonna stop and they're probably gonna go on strike.
It's gonna cause chaos, right? Chaos across the entire country. The problem is the Soviet Union is starting to fall apart all over the place. And as the Soviet Union is starting to fall apart, so too is Eastern Europe in rebellion. Poland in this picture here has a huge rebellion when the Pope, who's Polish, comes to Poland and starts to spread a message of unity and stuff, right? And so the Polish start taking to the streets, protesting for freedom of religion and freedom of assembly. And the Soviets arrest them at first, but pretty soon they can't arrest them because it's hundreds of thousands of Polish people.
Uh-huh.
The same thing starts happening in Czechoslovakia. Again, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Czechs come out. In Eastern Germany, the United States starts rock and roll stars, like movie stars and rock and roll stars and stuff. The United States starts broadcasting television into Eastern Europe. We set up big giant radio towers and big giant transmission towers, and we just start broadcasting everything, right? And we're just giving them television and rock and roll, right? And we're trying to let them know what freedom sounds like. And you know what freedom sounds like? Apparently, freedom sounds like Bruce Springsteen putting on a concert in Eastern Germany, right? Because Bruce Springsteen gets invited into Eastern Germany and he puts on a concert, and the Germans tell him, they say, all right, you are only allowed to sing for 30 minutes. And once you sing for 30 minutes, you cannot sing about any songs about freedom, about overthrowing the government, dissing on communism or anything, right? And what does he do? He sings for 4 hours, covering all of his songs, including all of his songs about freedom. And he openly tells them to overthrow their government, right?
Wow.
And he's not alone. David Bowie does this from England. Pink Floyd does this, right? That they're starting to get all of these bands who are doing concerts on the wall in Germany. And when Bruce Springsteen gets out there and starts playing his guitar, it's supposed to be 5,000 people in the crowd, and it's 25,000 people in the crowd, right? All of the Soviet Union starts to, they have like illegal TVs and things like that, right? And they're picking up these radio signals and they're listening to the music and they're watching, and they see Michael Jackson moonwalking across the stage, and they're all like, oh my God, what? Right? And they start to flip out. They want what America has. They want what the West has. They want freedom. So what they start doing, and I'm going to introduce you to the, Reagan leaves and we get the new president, but I'll introduce you to him next time. What we start getting is that the Germans start the process, and Western Germans decide to just start tearing the wall down. He's a Western German, a punk rock Western Germaner. And they just start to tear the wall down. They just decide that they don't want the wall anymore. And so they just start to break it. They start tearing it down. Here's the most famous, right? And they just start smashing the wall. And as the wall starts to come down, the East German soldiers, the communist soldiers that were there working for the Soviet Union, they're faced with the problem. What do you do when all these Western democracy people start tearing down the wall? What are you supposed to do? What are they supposed to do?
Kill them.
Open fire on the crowd.
Uh-huh.
What do?
Run.
They cross the wall. That's the soldiers crossing the wall. The wall gets torn down and the German government collapses and Germany becomes one country again. By 1989, Germany is united. By 1990, Poland, Hungary, and Bulgaria and Czechoslovakia have all overthrown their governments. I'll give them to you again. By 1990, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria have all overthrown their governments, and Germany. By 1991, Romania and Yugoslavia are in civil wars because the communists tried to hold on. And by December of 1991, the Soviet Union ceases to exist. The Soviet Union collapses and it creates all these new countries that we see here. These are all countries that have existed your whole life, right? But I remember when I was a kid, I remember sitting down at the breakfast table with my dad, drawing on our map in the atlas, drawing the new countries out, right? And this is Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan, and Russia. The Soviet Union collapses. In 1991, the Cold War is officially over.
Yay.
Yeah. Okay, I want you to make sure, let's put in the notes real quick. The number one reason why the Soviet Union collapses and why the Cold War ends is because of economic problems in the Soviet Union. Their economy is garbage and it collapses. That's the number one problem, number one issue. Okay, the number two issue is popular resistance in Eastern Europe. That's the number two cause of the end of the Cold War. Number
What was
three,
that one?
popular resistance in Eastern Europe. Cool. All right, that's a good place to stop. We've ended the Cold War.
What was reason number 3?
Oh, reason number three is pressure from the West. Pressure from the West in the form of media. Like literally, like we're broadcasting like MTV, like rock and roll and music videos and stuff. Like Michael Jackson moonwalking. Like we're broadcasting that kind of stuff into the. So pressure from the West. So it's cultural pressure, economic pressure, and political pressure from the West. Cool.
Well,
I think we're good to go. We lost Fernie, but that's okay, I guess. And I don't know, Emma's still on spring break, I suppose. Cool.